And with that, ladies and gentlemen, it really fills me with great pride to invite someone very, very special here on stage. Well, there is a saying that the only source of knowledge is experience. And yes, we have one of the most experienced persons in our midst. Ladies and gentlemen, may I now request our guest of honor, Mr. Deepak Parekh, the chairman of HDFC, to kindly share the visions for the mutual fund industry and why he thinks mutual funds sahi hai. And don't forget to tweet. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Shri Ajay Tyagi, Chairman of SEBI, Mr. Bala Subramaniam, Mr. Venkatesh, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning and thank you for inviting me here today. It's a pleasure to be here today. Taking the liberty to modify the great words of Abraham Lincoln, AMFI in its truest sense is an organization of mutual funds, by mutual funds, for mutual funds. Today, AMFI is 23 years old. As an institution, we must give due credit because they have done a lot of core work, which is ongoing, which has been done, and which is also continuing. The excitement in the mutual fund industry today is palpable. The fund industry is 55 years old, although the private sector is now 25 years old. It started with UTI 64. The last few years have been particularly interesting for the mutual fund industry, which has seen it grow, not only in size, but also in character. Like you've seen, from an AUM of 12 odd lakhs on March 31st, 16, to 22.9 lakh crores on June 30th is a huge jump. It's a jump of 86% in a little over 2 years. But interestingly, the growth has been driven by a significantly higher retail participation. Also, larger part of this growth has been in equity mutual funds. Yes, undisputedly, financial year 17 onwards will always stand out as the most defining period in the history of mutual fund industry. Now, I have been asked to share my vision of the mutual fund industry. My job is rather simple because there's complete consensus that the future of Indian mutual fund industry is extremely positive and promising. However, I've tried to identify 5 trends and insights that could define the future of our industry. Let me state upfront that these views are my personal views and has nothing to do with our institutions. The first trend is doubling of AUM in the next 5 years. The average assets, as you know, under management today is at 24 lakh crores, and most asset managers forecast that the AUM in the next 5 years will be doubled. That is, it will be 50 lakh crores. So what drives confidence that the AUM base will double? I think there are several reasons. A growing middle class, a larger working force population, better job opportunities will help increase the pool of investable funds. We Indians are always savers. Inherently, we are savers. Recently, there has been a shift in the savings habit of Indians from gold and real estate, so from physical assets to financial assets. And I see this trend unlikely to reverse. More importantly, compared to global standards, in India, mutual fund as an AUM, as a percentage of GDP, is still very low at 11%. Mutual fund AUM as a percentage of GDP in India is 11%, while the global average is 62%. So there is a huge potential left to be tapped. Key structural reforms that have been implemented, such as formalization of Indian economy, financialization of savings, financial inclusion endeavors, rising share of EPFO money allocated to equity, will all play out in strengthening the flows to our industry. In sum, there's a great sense of optimism, and the pie is large enough for all asset management companies. But let me add a caveat. They say that those who do not remember the lessons of history are condemned to repeat them. There is enough empirical evidence to show that bad financial decisions are often made in good times. So despite all the current euphoria, it is critical that AMFI stands ahead of the curve to ensure discipline amongst all its members. In this present spurt of growth, if even a few players are found to be deviant, it may well retard the growth of our industry. So I do believe we can achieve the target of doubling our AUM, provided we grow prudently and provided the players are not irrational. The second trend I envisage is that AMCs will need to re-strategize their cost structures. The challenge is, how is it possible to get more with less, which is getting more business with lower costs? With a growing share of retail investors, the regulator is right in prodding asset management companies to rationalize their cost structures. We all know that AUM growth will happen through wider reach and distribution. SEBI is already focusing on B30 cities to ensure increased flows from smaller towns and smaller cities. With the rapid rise of urbanization that is underway, one should not be surprised if mutual funds would be looking at B50 cities very soon. What is critical going forward is how commission structures evolve. While total expense ratios are capped, there are some concerns on how distributors are being incentivized. Of course, one cannot at all undermine the stellar role played by the distributors in the growth of our industry. I sometimes wonder how an industry with 4,000 to 5,000 sales personnel have been able to reach over 80 million customers, account holders. Yet, some distributors, unfortunately, are being lured through considerably higher premiums, higher commissions, and higher incentives. It is easy to succumb to greed. When a distributor begins to play the game of mutual fund hopping and shopping, the outcome is a great deal of mis-selling, which eventually hurts the retail customer. The problem is that there is intense competition in the industry. And if a few AMCs deviate from the norms, there is pressure for others to follow suit in order to retain their business. In the asset management business, distributors and AMCs have to be collaborative, and the relationship has to be mutually beneficial. Clearly, one doesn't want to encourage a system where distributors believe they can demand freebies or they can demand exotic free holidays. And if their demands are not fulfilled, they take the business elsewhere. I am personally against the practice of rewarding distributors with foreign or domestic holidays in the garb of training programs, which is a very common practice. In many countries, this would be simply deemed illegal to induce sales through such incentives. Is the customer really aware? Is your customer really aware of this incentive while buying your product? Will he still buy your product if he knows that you are doing this? A transparently disclosed commission should be the only way forward. I do hope the regulators look to stop this practice, which I believe has become common practice. Again, this problem isn't just unique to mutual funds. It is even more common and commonly seen for selling insurance products and other financial products. When there isn't consensus on self-discipline and adherence to a pre-agreed code of conduct, then the regulator has to step in to clamp down on undesirable practices. At this point in time, most retail investors in India still need hand-holding, which is done by distributors, and they may be unwilling to pay an additional charge, an additional amount as advisory fees. The challenge is, how do we inculcate a culture where the distributor recommends a fund to an investor based on the merits of the fund and not based on the amount of commission he or she receives? Third is a subject which was shown here, tackling digital disruption in asset management. Globally, investors are increasingly favoring an environment of low-cost investment solutions, and a digital platform helps to reduce costs. While younger and savvier investors may be more attuned to direct online investing, this may not be the case with many of India's potential first-time investors. So AMCs will have to simultaneously shape their digital strategies whilst increasing their physical presence also. The digital thrust does not just revolve around big data, analytics, artificial intelligence, and robo-advisors. More importantly, AMCs need to pay careful attention to growing cybersecurity risks and understand that they too are large repositories of sensitive customer data and all the debate that is going on privacy of customer data today. So AMCs will need to actively participate in the debate and the evolving structure of data privacy norms in India. Fourth trend is investor education and emphasis on long term. AMFI's campaigns like Mutual Fund Sahi Hai and Jan Nivesh has been very well received by the market. Yet the onus of investor education and the onus of investor awareness lies with each and every asset management company. So far as equities have been the flavor of the month, flavor of the season, as far as mutual funds are concerned. But the tide has changed and emerging markets have come under considerable pressure. For the Aam Aadmi, who just sees headlines of stock indices scaling all-time high, the investor is unable to comprehend as to why his or her equity fund is underperforming. Few may perhaps be sensitizing investors that the recent gain in the indices have been restricted to a handful of stocks only, while the broader market has underperformed. This is why it is important for retail investors to understand different time horizons. Financial product literacy, again, Bala talked about it, has to be placed at the forefront, and it is important to keep products simple and easy to understand. I must take this opportunity again to compliment SEBI for taking steps to limit the number of funds and streamline their categorization. This will help in a better understanding of products. It is true when they say that patience is an unappreciated virtue in investing. Patience is an unappreciated virtue in investing. We all have caught up in the perils of short-termism. I was actually pleasantly surprised the other day to find that none other than the US President, Mr. Donald Trump, is advocating scrapping of quarterly earnings, which would allow companies to focus on long-term growth and long-term goals. Likewise, a fund manager's performance has to be judged over an entire market cycle and not just over 1 year. The best of fund managers will have periods of underperforming their benchmarks, but that is no reason to panic. It is very, very critical that retail investors understand that unless they are willing to commit their capital for a longer period of time, they should not be investing in equity shares. So it becomes incumbent on AMFI, on asset management companies and all the distributors that are here to invest more time and resources in educating and re-educating investors on what exactly long-term investment entails. And the last point is nurturing talent for the future. This, to my mind, will be the most critical emerging trend. AMCs will need different skill sets in the future, yet talent will continue to be in acute shortage. Fund managers today have so many other options. Some get poached, some leave and set up their own shops, some shift to alternate investment AIFs, or some move into portfolio management services. There will be a need for greater focus on human resources, on talent management, talent retention, and reskilling of employees so they can keep pace with the technological advances and developments that are changing customer preferences. Reward structures too will have to change, where greater emphasis is laid on steady and consistent performance rather than a sporadic performance. One has seen various instances where the AMC preaches on the virtues of long-term investing, but they do not display the same patience with the results of their CIOs. AMCs don't need star CIOs. They need fund managers who are grounded. They need fund managers who have the tenacity to ride through rough times and exercise sound judgment across all market cycles. I do believe on the last point that AMCs risk falling behind the curve if they do not begin to strongly focus on diversity. Why are women professionals not in our industry? Why women professionals still underrepresented in the AMC space? And one hopes that this should change and will change soon. After all, women in India account for almost half of India's population, and a large segment of Indian households are run by women, and even they are not necessarily the key breadwinner. Women tend to be better savers than men, and this pool, and this is a pool that AMCs need to tap. Needless to add, a more inclusive and participative style of asset management in India will reap benefits for all of us in the future. All I have to say is that patience is the key virtue in investing, and AMFI has to play a huge important role in keeping the numerous asset management companies together, become a self-regulatory kind of body, bring proper discipline that no one deviates from that discipline, so that the market has a common denominator, and that is the only way we will succeed even further in future years. Thank you again for inviting me today.
Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your vision for the industry.